Hey guys, I'm going to walk you through the Independent Reading Project guidelines, so just kind of follow along with me as we go through and read it. So the very top part says choose one project from the choices below. Be sure to include your name, your class period, the title of the short story, and the author of the short story on your project. If we work on the project in class, which we will, I will let you know so that you can bring supplies. This project will be due May 16th. So before I read any further, I want to clarify with you that you have two options to choose from for your short stories. The first one will be the Telltale Heart, which you have in your notebook. The second one will be the Most Dangerous Game, and you don't have a copy of that text, but there are copies available for you in my classroom. As in fact, I believe they're on the teacher station with the sub. So with that being said, you are in fact going to have time in class to work on your project. Okay, you will have all class period May 16th, which is a Tuesday. So notice the day that you get a work day, May 16th, is the same day as the due date, which means you need to make sure that you bring all of your supplies to class on Tuesday so that you can work diligently to get your project turned in. This is a significant grade. It's one of your final major grades before the year's up. If you're struggling, you really need to make sure that you're working hard on this. In addition, if you wanted to work on this project over the weekend, like, tonight, Saturday, Sunday, you are more than welcome to. The only stipulation is that you need to have something ready to turn in when you come back, okay? So let's talk about these projects. The first one is your social map, and your social map reveals the plot of the story, okay? Your social map should include 5 to 7 neat, hand-drawn, colorful illustrations with a quote from the text written underneath each illustration. On the back of your social map, you need to have your name, your class period, and the title of your short story. So let's talk about what social maps are. We did this when we did the Holocaust social maps. Do you remember when everybody kind of drew names for a victim in the Holocaust, and then you had to create sort of a realistic depiction of their journey? This is sort of the same thing. The only difference is you're doing it with characters in the text. And so it can either be the crazy guy in the Telltale Heart, it can be General Zaroff, Rainsford from the Most Dangerous Game. Guys, it could even be Ivan. That would be kind of cool. So just make sure that you're following all of the guidelines for the social map in order to receive a grade of an A or higher, because that's possible. You can get extra credit points on this. The next one is your comic strip. It says transform the story into a comic strip. The comic strip should include 8 to 10 neat, colorful frames using dialogue and major plot events to recreate the story. On the back of your comic strip, and write your name, your class period, and the title of your short story. So notice we're kind of establishing a pattern here. I need to know that you are going to write down your name and your class period and what story it is. Otherwise, you're going to confuse me, and if you can confuse me, you're not going to get the grade. So with that being said, you are creating a comic strip. Please, guys, it doesn't have to be something that's really teeny tiny, like the size of a quarter. You can create a life-size comic strip. You can create something on computer paper. You can create something on construction paper. Don't make me have to squint to read the dialogue in your comic strip. Let's look at the last option. The last option is a book cover, and you can create a book cover for the story. So you didn't actually get to see any illustrations. You didn't get to see, if there even was a book cover for either of these stories. So that would be kind of a cool option. The book cover should include the front cover of the book and the back cover. After folding the paper in half, you will create the front cover by drawing a neat, hand-drawn, colorful illustration and by writing the title and author of the story, because that stuff's important. On the other half of the paper, meaning, when you open up that front piece, on the outside you've got the front of the book, and then on the inside there's usually like a flap where you can write some information. Here you're going to write a 5-sentence story hook to make a reader want to read your book. So this is sort of that information that really kind of captures your reader's attention. But don't be a spoiler. Don't give away the ending, especially in the Most Dangerous Game, or even Telltale Heart, because you didn't know what that was about when you first started reading it. On the back of your book cover, make sure that you write your name, your class period, and the title of your short story once again. So, before I move on and walk you through the rubrics of each one, I want you to pay particular attention that for every single illustration, they have to be hand drawn in order for you to receive credit. I have a lot of you in here who you like to print pictures and tape them or glue them to papers, but guys, for this assignment, they have to be hand drawn. So if you can find a way to trace something, that's okay, but I need to know that you did that by hand, okay? Otherwise, it's not going to look like you put too much effort into it, and that's not fair. So let's look at each rubric. The first one is going to be your social map, and notice that you can reach a maximum of 15 points. Okay, now down here at the bottom it says that you can get 5 to 10 points. Let me tell you, if this social map looks like crap, I'm not even going to give you 5 points for effort. You're going to get a 0. And if you get a 0 just for effort, you're already starting off pretty bad. Okay, so you've got two major things you're being scored on for the social map. The first one being your number of illustrations. Notice that in order for you to get the full 15 points, you have to have 7 neatly drawn illustrations. So again, it's not just a matter of having 7 illustrations, but they have to be neatly hand-drawn illustrations. Okay? For text evidence, you give one relevant quote from the text for each of the 7 illustrations. Okay? Guys, let's talk about this for a second. I noticed that it says text evidence and it just says gives one relevant quote, but you know the deal. Every time you have a quote, you have to explain the quote, and that is no different here. So even though it doesn't say on your rubric right now that you have to have an explanation, if I were you, I would write that down on my handout right now, because you have a copy of this handout in front of you. I'm just showing you the electronic version. So underneath where it says text evidence, 15 points, kind of where I'm waving this mouse around right now, I would write down, don't forget explanation. That's going to be really important for you to be successful. All right, now that you've made that adjustment, let's look at the comic strip rubric. So again, you're being scored on 2 major categories. The first one being the comic strip frames, the second being your text evidence. So let's look at your comic strip frames. The comic strip has at least 10 frames with colorful hand-drawn illustrations. So here I sort of specified for you the hand-drawn, but we know that all of our illustrations have to be hand-drawn. So in order for you to get the full 15 points, you have to have at least 10 frames. So pay attention, at least 10. So if you really wanted to get creative and have 11 or 12 or 13, you do you. That's awesome, okay? But in order for you to get 15, you only have to have at least 10, okay? Make sure you're adding color. I have a lot of you in here too. You really like to sketch and you like to do stuff like that that's just with pencil. You know I like to see things in color. I think they're pretty. Please do that. That would make me happy. All right, text evidence. This says 10 frames contain dialogue or major plot details from the story. Guys, dialogue, you know what this is. Dialogue is when a character is speaking to another character, speaking out loud, speaking to himself or herself. As long as it has quotes somewhere or it's italicized, something like that, that's a pretty good indicator that there's dialogue. Okay, major plot details. This is something that's kind of leading you up to the climax of the text. It's leading you up to the resolution. So again, you have to have text evidence here. If you're going to put a quote in your text evidence, you have to explain it, okay? If you choose not to include text evidence, this is where it gets tricky in the comic strip, okay? If you don't have text evidence, but you make reference to something that happened in the text, which can be more difficult to do, but if you reference something in the text without actually quoting it, you can still get credit. Okay, so I know that sounds tricky, but honestly, if I were you, I'd probably play it safe, and I would just incorporate a text quote, whether that was dialogue or something that was said, and explain that underneath the comic strip, because I would much rather play it safe doing something that I know how to do than sort of paraphrase something and just show it in the illustrations. And again, if I'm saying something and you're slightly confused, guys, you have the help form. So as soon as I'm done walking you through this, just go ahead, fill that out, and I can get back to you pretty quickly because you know I'm at this conference, so I can access the computer and get back to you. All right, let's look at the next one. Option 3 is our book cover. There are two options for this. The first one says front book cover. So you're actually going to be scored based on just the front book cover, okay? And that's the part where you have to have the title, the author, and a colorful hand-drawn illustration. So fairly simple enough. You're being judged on just those things. And I know that it will be beautiful because you guys are going to use color, and it's going to be hand-drawn, and it's going to be awesome. The second thing you're going to be scored on for the book cover is going to be the back book cover, okay? So when I say the back book cover, I mean like the inside of that front book cover. I guess that should have been clarified a little bit better. But inside, you're being scored based on the summary. The summary is supposed to identify the central idea of the text without giving away the ending, but it's also interesting. You know, don't be very dry. I want you to say something that's going to kind of captivate me, make me think, dang, that was a really good summary because now I want to read the book, even though I've already read it. But you know what I mean. So make sure that you're taking your time. You're trying to write something that sounds good. You don't necessarily have to have evidence here, but if you did, I wouldn't be upset about it. Okay? I just want it to be really good, and I want it to be accurate. All right, so with that being said, these are sort of materials that you might need. I've listed them all here, option 1, option 2, option 3. For option 1, the materials that you have at your disposal: printer paper, colored pencils, markers, crayons. You can decorate your social map with string, glitter, beads, any other creative materials. Some of my students last year really went crazy with this, and they had all sorts of kind of 3D looking stuff in their social map, and that was awesome. But it's nothing that you have to have. For option 2, your comic strip materials that you can use are exactly the same. Your printer paper, your colored pencils, markers, crayons, all that good stuff. And then, of course, for option 3, your book cover, same exact thing. Printer paper, colored pencils, markers, crayons, the works. Unfortunately, I don't have the cool stuff in my classroom for you to use, but I will actually have printer paper that you can use. I'll have poster paper, construction paper. You guys know that I have colored pencils and markers and crayons, but if you wanted to use anything else, you're gonna have to bring that in on Tuesday, okay? But just a reminder, if you wanted to work on this over the weekend, knock yourself out. That's going to be awesome. You just make sure you have it in class by Tuesday and you'll be good to go. All right, if you don't have any other questions for me, I'm going to go ahead and close out of this. Make sure that part of your assignment today is submitting your project preference form. So let me know what project you want to complete. And then also make sure that if you do have any questions, you are actually using that Google form so that way I can get back to you pretty quickly. Otherwise, when you're finished with everything, you are free to engage in a very quiet activity that does not involve you talking to anybody around you. So if that means that you have to put your forehead to your desk and go to sleep, do what you have to do, because I do not want to come back and have an ugly conversation with you, especially on Monday, because Monday is supposed to be field day. So make sure that you're on your very best behavior, and I hope that this was helpful to you. Bye, guys.